I wanted to marvel at the differences in how many countries we have people logging in from. So I took a look at where are you logging in from, all of us in this room. And I want to say we have people logging in from Egypt, Bangladesh, Romania, Belgium, Turkey, Bulgaria, Italy, Austria, Portugal, the US, and the UK. And we are also expecting people from Nigeria and Sudan too. It's like, yes, it is a big community, and this is just a representation of the bigger community, which is the entire facilitation community. So yes, that is an amazing thing. So welcome all. I'm not. We're still waiting for others, but yeah, we'll just kickstart the event. For those of you who haven't met me before, my name is Hepa, and I'm the program officer. I'll be hosting the event today on behalf of Soliya team. So welcome everyone. I just wanted to give a little bit of background of this today's event, actually, with all this variety and diverse background that you come from. We know that there is also a variety and diverse background of the things that you do outside of Soliya. And because there is this variety, we wanted to make a place and a space for all the backgrounds that you come in from professionally. And you have added a lot through these backgrounds in your facilitation. So we wanted to have a space where you express that, where you share with the community this kind of background. So the community lounge has been such a place and the hub for that. But also we wanted this to be another way that you would share these things with us. So yeah, thank you for being part of this as presenters and as attendees as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Waidehi. I am currently the CEO of Soliya. I am very honored to be here with you all today. I am going to say a few words at the top end. I've really chosen to stay at a much broader framework level with my remarks. I feel like the expertise in the field of facilitation and online facilitation really lies with you all. So I'm not going to, I'm not really sharing tips or anything like that. I'm merely sharing some reflections in terms of my thoughts on the work that we all do, its relevance to the current context, and maybe be so bold as to share where I think this work takes us as a global community. So to share very briefly, my personal background, I am originally from India. I grew up in Hong Kong, where I completed my education. I then moved to the UK, also for education, was back in Southeast Asia, and then moved to North America about 23 years ago, and have lived variably between the United States and Canada. So lived and worked and existed in lots of different places. And professionally, I originally trained in the field of counseling psychology and worked as a counselor with adolescents. But my sort of compelling passion, if you like, was always linked to people and their power to transform conflict. And so my leanings were always to be experiencing or professionally engaging at an international level. So I went back and I moved into the field of conflict resolution writ large, and worked in development through an organization called War Child up in Canada, and then moved professionally to Soliya, and I'm coming to about 13 years. Just one point of interest in terms of how I started my career with Soliya, however, so that was 17 years ago, and I started as a facilitator. I met the founders, and when they were first putting the whole thing together, and I really liked what they were planning to do. And I said, you know, I'm a trained counselor, I'm a trained mediator, but I really like the idea of the facilitator role. And if you'll have me, I'll volunteer. So I did. And so I was in the first cohort of trained facilitators. So I began as you have, which I think is a nice thread for all of us to have in common. And so with Soliya then, as you know, those of you who've been with us either for a short or longer period of time will know that we've done a lot of growing over the past few years. We've gone from an organization that was reaching, approximately 700 to 800 young people a year through the dialogue programs to now, coming to a place where we're reaching closer to 5,000 young people. And a part of that growth and transformation is down to you all and the remarkable community that you have formed and the expertise that you bring. So just a quick thank you at the top end to all of you. So moving now into kind of thinking about, and I spend a lot of time reflecting on these things as, a part for the course, for the work that we do, but also a lot of what I do is trying to help others understand who are not in the field or who are not working at the front lines, if you like, of the work that we all do, and trying to help them understand the power and potential of facilitation, dialogue facilitation, and then adding that dimension of the online to that. So the things that I kind of share and reflect on are what this work allows for is the creation of space. Space where people can learn to listen, and the power of that, the power of creating listening spaces, is what seeds the possibility of people experiencing respectful engagement. And I think that can never be underestimated. You can have a very difficult conversation with someone, but if you feel like there was respect held in that space, that conversation is likely to be 10 times more productive. With that cultivation of respect, I think the thing that you give the biggest head nod to is people's humanity. If you can maintain one another's humanity in a space, then I think you stand the chance of creating constructive engagement, but also seeding change. I think the work that we all do together lends itself to enabling us and the people with whom we do the dialogue work to cultivate a lens of empathy. And as you all will know, or will have heard, or will probably share, the view that, from my perspective, empathy is sort of the core change agent for communities. And the way I see it, it's actually, it's a hard skill. It's a modus operandi. It's a deliberate practice. It's a commitment to that practice, so that it's not just something that you offer up by chance. It's actually a lens, and you use it to make choices, to make decisions, to guide your interactions. And it's not easy. And it's something that you have to continue to work on. And I think the work that we all collectively do goes to that. I also think the other really important thing about this work is the fact that by creating spaces for facilitated discourse, what you're building is a sense of responsibility and a sense of self-efficacy. So when you think about people, when you are faced with a difficult conversation, how many times, do people find themselves in a situation where they feel a sense of responsibility? Oh, I ought to wade in. I ought to engage in this conversation. And what stops them is that sense of self-efficacy, but I don't know how, or I don't think I can, or what would happen if I did? And I think by creating opportunities for facilitated dialogue and showing people how that gets done, you end up creating pairing of responsibility and self-efficacy, which then leads itself to activation, which is ideally what we want this to end up at, and I think that when you layer on the sort of the online element of this, I think what you do is, we talk about creating safe spaces, and I think that by adding the online piece to it, you create the possibility that you've created brave spaces, safe, brave spaces. So by being online, there's a way in which people use it as a place to practice before they can do it in person. And I think that the way facilitation works online, where at least in our model, where you're doing sort of spaced engagement, you're having these facilitated dialogues for a period of time, and then you're digesting, you're coming back to it, rather than kind of intensive in-person dialogue processes. I think it lends itself to a deepening of the learning. So going from kind of what I reflect on as the power and potential, and then thinking about, but what about the power and potential as it relates to the now? So for me, the two key elements to reflect on are, the global health crisis, the pandemic. And so this has been a moment where I think that technology has made its power known, but also technology, and it's important not to gloss over the fact that this moment has also shed glaring light on inequities around technology, right? Suddenly technology becomes the way for people to conduct business, education, health, work, information, and we realize that, hang on, we're not where we're supposed to be with technology. So that said, I also think this is a moment that has created clear illustrations around what are the most important skills that people need to conduct themselves in a moment of crisis. And I think the things that come to mind for me are critical thinking, empathy, and collaboration. And if you think about the moment that we're going through, and we're still going through it, the global health crisis, I think the critical thinking element comes in when you think about the amount of information that we're all processing, and where it's coming from, and our ability to think critically about both the consumption and authorship of that information. And I think that that's a skill you all actively build for people through facilitation. The empathy piece to me is, I've gone on about it enough already, but I think where it has come up is in noting where we see excellence in leadership. And I think at whatever levels, community or school or country, I think if you look at all of the places where success is felt in leadership, the one thing, the trait that they hold in common, or those moments will hold in common, is that lens of empathy. And the last thing I talked about was collaboration. We're never getting out of this without the power of collaboration. And I think all the wins that we need to come through this global crisis and create new narratives for ourselves as a global community will come through collaboration. And I think when you facilitate dialogue processes, you're teaching that. So that I see as the clear relevance to something like the global health crisis of what we do. And then the other thing is the race revolution. And for this one, and this is a very personal reflection, but when I think about how we got here, if you like, in terms of where we got to a point where things were so broken, I think one of the elements is that the frameworks and spaces for difficult conversations have been shut down, particularly when it comes to the issue of race. And I think when you shut those spaces down, when you create the possibility that people don't feel that sense of responsibility and efficacy around wading into these conversations, you create very mired systemic rot, basically. Now, people will say to me all the time when they hear me talking about things like empathy or this work, and they'll say, well, are you saying that, you know, this is the cure for future genocide? Are you saying that dialogue will, you know, is the cure for systemic wrongs? And, you know, obviously that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying, though, is that there's a highway of work that needs to be done. And one big lane in that, on that highway, is dialogue. And I think if you shut that lane down, then you slow down all the rest of the processes. And so, to me, when you think about something being a systemic issue, the question I want to ask is, who creates the systems? Where do they come from? Who shepherds the systems? Who governs them? Who ensures they stay in place? And the answer to all of those questions is people. So if we don't fundamentally work to change how we as people operate, then you're never going to change a system. So going from there, I'll just move quickly on to, okay, so that's, you know, what we do, why it's relevant now, and where do we go from here? So to me, it's, you know, without sounding naive, I think it's relatively straightforward. If the more we create these spaces, the more we encourage more people to do the work, the more that people are instilled with the skills and that sense of responsibility, then the more we're creating the possibility of future change. And as facilitators, to me, you are the most powerful of human beings. You are self-aware, you're committed to listening, you're committed to understanding and amplifying the why of people around you. You're motivated to bring about transformation. You're enthused by the idea of seeding discourse. And by doing all of that, the sum of what you do, I think, is you're contributing to tangible transformation, which will lead to change in communities, in societies, and you know, dare I say, the world. So I thank you.
So first, I want to leave the floor to you, Valentina. What was it that made our co-facilitation special for you?
I have one word to answer to your question, that is trust. Trust in the other person, trust in each other's skills, and trust in our collaboration, in our process together. So when you saw our presentation title that mentions the human factor, our own definition of human factor is kind of the art of being confident and safe enough in the co-fac relationship to open up, show your human side, and kind of going with it and letting this outside world in your co-facilitation relationship that benefits the communication, the co-working relationship, and the well-being of the facilitation involved as a whole. But the question that comes next is, how do you build trust with your co-facilitator? So Betul, I'm going to need your support here. Just give us a second. So we've been talking and calling and brainstorming, and we came up with a rule to build trust. And Betul is in the process of screen sharing that so that we'll stick with you. Don't draw mustache on Betul's face while we're waiting. So here it is. No copyright check for this. We invented the TED rule to build trust. That is, take time to get to know each other before the program starts. Express your ideas, your feelings, your concerns, and debrief, debrief, debrief after each session. Be honest with each other, be open. And back to discussion layout. Let me now go back to the start and share with you the story that led to this role. So when Betul and I first met before the program started, there was this genuine interest in getting to know the person behind the facilitator. We were kind of studying each other. We were actively listening to each other. We were assessing our strengths and weaknesses. We were looking each other in the eyes. And we weren't doing that to tick off a list, even if we had the given guidelines on co-facilitation relationship. But we were rather doing that because we wanted to build trust and create a positive co-facilitation relationship. So why am I telling you this? Because in our relationship, there was no hierarchy, no power dynamic. We were both humble to enter this relationship like a blank page, ready to learn from one another, regardless of our facilitation experience. And this could be easy if facilitators are similar. But here, in terms of background, culture, facilitation style, working style, Betul and I couldn't be more different. Betul is all about the procedure, while I'm all about the process. So we had to somehow meet halfway.
Well, yes, exactly. I was sometimes too much in detail, and Valentina was the one taking me back to the big picture. And at this point, I want to emphasize the importance of the first meeting we had and our initial agreements. Having different backgrounds and diverse cultures, I had told Valentina that there could be instances that we might misunderstand each other, and therefore we should be open to asking and receiving questions for clarification purposes. And we talked on this fact and agreed to share any doubts appearing in our minds without accumulating them. So at this point, one may think that this is such an obvious fact and may not need to talk about it at all. But we believe it had a kind of magic stick effect to open the door for transparency and trust between us. Hence, from the first meeting, we were honest to share our strengths and weaknesses and talked about how we could support each other. So this dialogue created the opportunity to see how we can complement each other in terms of being flexible versus being structured, keeping an eye on time versus going with the flow, pace of transcription, triggers related to the topics, and so on and so forth. So these were all evaluated before encountering a surprise during the session. And we also agreed on how to collaborate. We tried to balance the workload in session preparation, and we were also mindful of equal voice and appearance during the sessions.
First, I'm sorry, Chris, I brought it back to discussion layer. I didn't see your comment in the chat box. So after everything you've heard from Betul, that was the nice theory. But then the real test came with practice when we had our first session together. It was a good session, not a perfect one. But thanks to that initial agreement that we had, after the session, we had a very long, very honest debriefing. We were sharing our first impressions, but also providing each other feedback on our performance, on our facilitation style. And we brainstormed together how we could complement that and build off on that for the coming sessions. So in the coming sessions, what I believe happened is that we were comfortable with each other, and that was modeling the kind of interaction we wanted participants to have, because our voices were balanced, transitions felt very natural. And we had a constant open communication line. In this sense, we were using directly the virtual rooms messaging, and we used that for live feedback, live compliments and comments, but also direct call-outs when needed. And because the group was our priority and the group's needs were our priority, we wouldn't take those comments personally because we knew that where they were coming from and that was for the sake of the group.
Well, some attitudes have prerequisites, and we believe that the prerequisite for trust is investing sufficient time both in the process and with each other. Time that is necessary to plan the session, time to debrief the session, and furthermore, time to create team spirit. And here is how we did it. First of all, we had set a routine by dedicating our Saturday afternoons to live calls and plan the sessions. As mentioned earlier, we had two groups. To enrich our experience, we made sure to alternate in leading the activities in each group. There was always humor and laughter in these meetings. Um, for instance, the baby crow I rescued during those days, Valentina's adventures in Peru, etc., etc. And these were always the part of our talks. So it never felt like working, actually. Just the contrary, it served to improve our team spirit. And we used the session notes as a tool for debriefing. We were reflecting together with what happened while filling the notes. And now we can clearly see that as weeks passed, each debriefing session strengthened our working relation, and even our facilitation skills improved because we were learning from each other at the same time. So talking about all these aspects, it was kind of a flashback to spring semester for me. So I want to ask Valentina, looking back on it as a whole, what would you say about your main takeaway from this experience?
Well, after probably my worst facilitation performance ever, where I knew I really messed up, Betul told me, and she said, Valentina, you are taking the group dynamics personally, and this is impacting the dialogue. And I'm so grateful that you did, Betul, because that has been the biggest learning in my facilitation journey so far. And thanks to that straightforward comment, Betul raised awareness on the fact that in session, it is not about me, it is about the group. And thanks to that and this newfound awareness, I became better at regulating my own emotions in the session, but also outside the session. And what about you, Betul? When you think of this experience, what was your main learning takeaway?
I would definitely say flexibility. I think this is very much related to knowing the strengths and weaknesses of each other. Since we had already shared them, we knew our limits and we felt confident to be flexible as per the flow of the session. And one more thing, I really admired your typing skills. It was unbelievable to receive messages from you at the same time while you were transcribing. This made me feel supported all the time. And I concluded that efficient transcription is beneficial both for participants and for co-facilitators. So I am now working to improve further my transcription skill.
As a result, we both grew as facilitators. We gained a friend, virtually for now, and we decided to stay in touch beyond the program. So Betul is now my go-to person for facilitation and non-facilitation related advice. We share readings, resources, interesting opportunities, and we even kept the good old habit of making video calls. We call them our personalized town halls, where we have an intellectual exchange about topics that interest us. And this is our story and what worked for us. And we know that the co-facilitation relationship can work in many ways. So before closing our presentation, we would like to engage you all in a small reflection exercise. For this, if you are comfortable doing so, we will ask you to close your eyes. Take a couple of deep breaths. One more. And now, try to think of the facilitator with whom you've had the best co-facilitation experience so far. Try to visualize their face. If you can't, that's okay. Try to remember your experience with them. How did it feel? What made your relationship so positive? Was it the human factor? You can now open your eyes. So this person you've just thought of may not be aware of your appreciation. So why not sending them a message right after this event? Thank you.
Okay, so I'm really happy to be here, and I'm look forward to sharing some thoughts on how to use emotional intelligence and empathy to strengthen a coach-coachee relationship. And why I'm interested in these topics in particular is it's because it's what I do outside of facilitation. I am a coach and I teach emotional intelligence to Erasmus students at university. So I'll just give you a brief outline about what I'm going to cover today. So we'll talk about the general definitions of emotional intelligence and empathy and why they're important, and then we'll see how we can incorporate them and how, you know, a coach-coachee in a coach-coachee relationship, and how a coach-coachee can be conscious of them when working together. So let me just get on to the next slide. Yes, I hope that you can see the next slide. So now, what is emotional intelligence? It is an ability to detect or recognize and monitor with patience and insight our own emotions, how we're feeling, but also how other people are feeling. And when you can detect that, we can use that information to guide how we think and how we act. And the reason why emotional intelligence is very important is because it's an integral part of connecting to others. And it helps us form and develop meaningful relationships with one another. In the past, the general focus, interestingly enough, in the hiring process was your IQ, right? Your intelligent quotient, which meant, you know, determining you know, your cognitive skills, how well you scored in your SATs, how well you can reason or use your rational skills. But then over time, it was interesting that companies realized to be successful is not, or to have a very strong IQ or very high IQ is does not guarantee success, not alone at least. And how successful one is really determined by both your IQ as well as your emotional intelligence. So according to Daniel Goleman is known for being the founding father of emotional intelligence. And he had spoke about 4 core principles of emotional intelligence. And the first principle, he said, is about self-awareness. And what we mean by self-awareness is to be aware of your own emotions. How are you experiencing them? And this could be, in a practical sense, if you are facilitating a room and in a room and someone says something, it could be a trigger for you. So how are you experiencing triggers? How are you experiencing your life as you go, day by day? And an interesting fact is we experience over 140 emotions every single day, right? So how aware are we of our emotions? And the second thing is self-management. And this means to be aware of your feelings. Now, feelings are different to emotions. Feelings are different because it's the story we tell ourselves, and we tie it mainly to our emotions. So if you're feeling anger, for example, and with that anger, there's a narrative that you tell yourself. The minute you feel anger, you start, jumping to conclusions, because that is the narrative that you have formed over the years. And in order to manage our emotions, we want to ask ourselves, do I have all the necessary information to be feeling this way, right? That's how you can stop and kind of manage how I'm feeling. And the third thing is social awareness. So being able to read the room. And what we mean by that is being in tune with others, right? Recognizing how other people are feeling or the emotions they may be experiencing. And I know we work in an online setting, but with the cameras and with audio, you can pick up on these things. It's not just in-person relationships. It can very well translate to on camera as well. And once you experience these emotions, then you've got your social skills. So how do I act and respond? Notice I didn't say react. Yeah, we're trying to respond to what other people are going through. Okay, so now we've talked a little bit about emotional intelligence. Now, what is empathy? And empathy, we encourage people to practice at Soliya during our sessions with participants. And what empathy is really the capacity to understand or feel what another person may be experiencing, but the key here is from within their own frame of reference. So that is the capacity to place yourself in another person's shoes. And according to Teresa Wiseman, and she's a medical health professional, she had 4 defining attributes to empathy. And she said, the first thing in order to practice empathy is perspective taking, which means, to be able to see the world as someone else sees it. And again, in a practical sense, you may be facilitating something or a session, and someone else that you're coaching is facilitating a session, and you might be experiencing the same thing, but if they tell you about it, you need to see it from their perspective. Just because you've experienced it as well doesn't mean your experience or your feelings or how you have experienced it is the same. So it's very important to be able to take perspective. And then the second thing, very, very important, is to be non-judgmental. So you are not there to determine whether a person is good or bad or whether their actions are good or bad. You are there to just be there for them. Yeah. So non-judgment and the place that you cultivate with your coachee has to not all judgment has to go from there. And the third thing is you need to understand another person's feelings. So you're recognizing a person's feelings, and how you do that is you have to tap into a time where you may have experienced something either the same or something similar. And when you can do that, then it's important to communicate that understanding of their emotion. And when you communicate to the person that you understand how it feels, or this is what you may be feeling, wow, person X, I hear this, and it sounds like you're really frustrated, and it sounds like you're really angry about the situation, or you're very happy about the situation. This helps them see that you recognize, you validate, and you acknowledge how they feel. And that's super important when it comes to empathy. So now that we've talked a little bit about the concepts of empathy and emotional intelligence, let's focus on how we can practically use them in the coach-coachee relationship. Okay, so to talk about what we do as coaches, I'm going to tell you about an experience I had as a coach, and how I use the points listed here to achieve a successful outcome with my coachee, while still employing the aspects of emotional intelligence that we just looked at. And I was once observing a solo facilitator, this was last semester, in a session, and I noticed that they had an interesting little quirk. And each time they turned on their microphone to speak, I noticed that they laughed or they giggled even before speaking. And I wasn't sure what was happening or if there was something that was funny going on. So I noted it down and continued to observe the session. Once the session was over, it was time to communicate with the facilitator. So my style of communication, of coaching and communication, as maybe some of you in the room who I have interacted with and worked with, is very hands-on. And I like to have direct contact over a call or a video call. So I asked them if they had a free moment to chat about the session. Now, I just want to say here, I'm not that having a phone call or having a video call might not suit everyone. So just, be aware that it's really important to find the right means of communication for your relationship with your coach or coachee. And we spoke for about 45 minutes. We were making some progress, but this was directly after their 2-hour facilitation session. So I could immediately tell they were exhausted and any more coaching was going to be unproductive at this point. So the takeaway here is to recognize the boundaries and limits of yourself and your coachee. And that is an important part of the communication process. And if your coachee does not share their boundaries, make sure to ask. And once you know, respect them, right? Respect them because that will ensure the most optimal communication between the two of you. The next point is really about listening to your coachee. It's imperative to hear how they feel in order to tackle anything that needs attention. And they need to be relaxed to do this, so make sure you put them at ease. And that is why, but more importantly than listening, and this is where emotional intelligence comes in, is if you can pick up on something that they are feeling but not necessarily expressing, and it could really benefit the process. So that is why listening in the context is about both hearing the words and understanding the person. This means picking up on their tone of voice, the specific language that they're using, and their facial expressions. And another really important thing to remember is that you should not be trying to think of solutions as they're talking. Yeah, you really need to listen. Yeah, once they are finished talking, a good way to ensure that you've understood them is to paraphrase, and we do this always in sessions, so that they know that so that you know what you have heard is the correct information. And at this point, you're also just trying to gauge them and comprehend what they're feeling. And once again, you're doing this with no judgment. So now that we've listened, and it's important to give feedback, and in my case, remember, she was giggling. In my case, my coachee did not bring up the giggling and the laughing. So it was important that I bring it up, but I wanted to do so in a way that didn't make her feel awkward or ashamed or put her on the spot. Instead, I wanted to invite her to share what happened without something like I was interrogating her or judging her. And I said, I noticed you giggling and laughing a lot every time you took the mic. It's endearing, but do you care to share what it is that was making you laugh? And it's always important to remember, guys, that when you say something, it's not what you say, it's always how you say things. It's very, very important how you say, your tone of voice, how you bring the message across. And that makes a world of a difference. And in the same light, her laughing and her giggling could have been perceived as something different to an outsider. I could have easily seen it as being rude, as her being careless or inattentive, or not taking the session seriously. But in moments like these, it's super important not to make your mind up about people's actions, but instead you need to really be very generous with your assumptions. So this means give the most generous interpretation possible for their words, their actions, or their intentions. And if you aren't sure, then ask, right? And understand why they acted in a certain way, because their reason may be valid, or it might give you insight into something that you're not really aware Now, when you speak to your coachee, it's really important to put them at ease. And the way, and that way they will be more encouraged to open up and tell you how they really feel, because that's the goal, right? So to put them at ease, you need to guarantee that the space you hold for them, again, is a space of no judgment. And once I was able to kind of cultivate that kind of atmosphere, the facilitator immediately said, well, I laugh and giggle every time I take the mic because I'm very nervous and I'm anxious every time I even enter the room. And I'm not gonna lie, that did surprise me, because not only were they a seasoned facilitator, I thought they were great. And I was curious to understand why they continued to be nervous and ask loads of, and I asked loads of different questions. That can range from, probing questions to clarifying questions. But what I did was I tried to spend time exploring where the anxiety came from. And we focused on that for a while, and finally having understood where it stemmed from, it gave me a way to be able to coach her and to help her overcome it. So we worked together on a solution of how to tackle their anxiety, and in doing so, I was only there to provide guidance. And they came up with answers and solutions that felt right for them. And the key is, as a coach, you're not there to, spoon feed them or give them answers. You're there to help them in the direction, or in a right direction, where it would be productive for them. And this does two things. If you are there to guide them, it does two things. It helps them walk away feeling empowered to implement their own solutions, and it motivates them to continue to want to better themselves. And by kind of coming to those conclusions, it allows them to be in charge of their own progress and be held accountable for it as well. And when you give guidance, I think it's super important to be kind and to be understanding, and to remember that their style is unique to them. Every facilitator's style is unique to them, and improvements should be able to enhance their style and not to convert it to another style. So always keep that in mind. And another aspect of emotional intelligence is to never, ever, 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 in any circumstance, and I will highlight this, no matter how bad the situation is, to leave your facilitator in doubt of or insecure of their skills. As a facilitator, or who they are as a facilitator. And should something bad happen, something that they cocked up on in a facilitation session, really treat it as an isolated case and work on how you can work together to improve it. And remember always, someone's actions is not a definition, or it doesn't say who the person is, right? So treat the action as an action and work on how to improve it together. And then checking in, as the semester progressed, and with this particular example, I kept in contact and kept checking in on this facilitator to see how they were doing. And the way I checked in, I only had that one session with her for 45 minutes. And this involved, and the checking in involved emails, observing sessions, and providing notes. And at the end of the semester, and this was completely unexpected, they did send me a lovely thank you note. And what stood out was that they appreciated the security of having someone to reach out to. And this is how I knew that the coaching process had provided a positive impact, and that this coachee walked away having learned something about herself and wanted to continue to improve her own skills. So what I have spoken about so far mostly discusses the coach's approach, but this can never be successful if the coachee is not actively taking part in strengthening the relationship as well. So this means you need to, as a coachee, you need to trust your coach's ability to help guide you. You need to be able to share your thoughts and have the courage to be vulnerable, especially if that space is made available to you. Then be courageous and be vulnerable. But also, and more importantly, to recognize what your boundaries are and vocalize them. There's really no harm in vocalizing your boundaries. If anything, it will only strengthen the relationship. And be proactive in welcoming the guidance and feedback from your coach, and take initiative in finding solutions for anything that comes up, and be part of the brainstorming and solutions. And I mentioned in the slide before checking in, right? Checking in with your coach, with your coachee is very important, but checking in goes both ways. A coachee is also responsible for getting in touch with their coach, and you're there to get in touch, but not only to talk about the struggles and your difficulties, you're there to also celebrate the successes that you've had. So if you had a great session, pick up the phone or write to your coach and say, I've had this great session and this is why, right? Celebrate your successes. So I've kind of from both sides provided a little bit about how emotional intelligence and empathy can be integrated into the coaching process to help strengthen the relationship. So I hope that this talk has given you a few tools that you can maybe try and implement as a coach or coachee. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Rita, and I'm here to invite you to explore the art of the focused conversation. And I think you will find it very interesting, and it will make a lot of sense after the storytelling that Valentina and Betul brought us, and after the explanation of the emotional intelligence process by Kalut. So in the next 20 minutes, more or less, I will invite you all to experience a method that applies a structure into the thinking process. And we will understand how it can contribute for facilitating deeper conversations or reflections. And the idea is that conversation matters, you know better than me. And when we are facilitating a group dialogue, it's crucial, it's vital that we need to unleash the wisdom and the collective intelligence of the group. Saying that, we need to ask the right questions in order to have the right answers. So this is key. And I'm going to show you and invite you to explore, because we will really experience this method of as a way to promote a real participation and inclusivity to improve better communications. So I'm going to present you the focused conversation method, also known as ORID, which is a 4-steps framework that uses questions in 4 levels. The O for objective, the R for reflective, the I for interpretive, and the D for decisional. Easy, but let's see if it's simple or not, and if you think it's effective in the way you can use it in your facilitation practice. So let's see how this can work. And we will use an example. We can use a lot of examples. I hope you could see that we can have a wide variety of conversations using this method, but for us to understand better how it works, I will invite you to experience an example that maybe some of you have already experienced in your facilitation sessions. So let's imagine that you are facilitating a session and something happened. You noticed that some people, or most of the people, are not participating in the session, or someone is taking control of the conversation. Does this ring the bell to you? So the intention of this conversation, it would be me or you as a facilitator, you are doing this internal reflection in order to understand what is going on and what can you do to improve the quality of the session. So let's use this example to explore ORID. We will do it in a 4-steps process, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a sequence made of questions that we will answer step by step. And for you to be easier to follow, I will put some info in the chat for you to follow. So let's start for the beginning. Let's think about this. So I'm a facilitator, I'm leading a session, and something happened because someone is taking control of the session. First step, objective level. I think for myself. What is going on? What am I seeing or what am I hearing? Objective level. So let me put this into the chat so you can have this registration. One minute, please. So at this point, we are thinking about facts, objective level. I'm trying to send it to you. I don't know what's happening to the chat. Do you have it? Okay, it seems, okay, perfect. So first step, objective. What are the questions that I can do regarding some facts? What am I seeing or what am I hearing? What are the words that are being used? Okay, objectives. Then we can go into a second level. Because after we think about what is going on, what are the words or phrases that have been spoken? What background data do I know and do I have? So after data, we can go into a second level, which is the reflective level. And in the reflective level, we can think about feelings, emotions. I'm putting this into the chat again. So what questions can be questions that we are going to ask connected to personal reaction, internal responses? What is intriguing me? What surprised me the most? Emotions. The R, reflective. So this is the second level in which we can think about what are the reactions that I'm noticing in myself, in the group. So that's why the emotional intelligence is so relevant. So after this second level, the reflective level, we can now move on into the third one, which is the I, the interpretive level. And for this level, I'm going to put it on the chat. It's all about meaning, interpretation. So I'm going to ask questions that can reach out meaning and value. The personal significance that I'm attributing to what is going on. So I might say, why are they reacting like this? Maybe they are not comfortable with the topic. Or maybe someone knows a lot about the topic and someone is not comfortable about it. What are the possible reasons for this to be happening? What values do I need to hold as we continue? Silence management. How can we as facilitators deal with silence? So I for interpretive level. And then, so we have the O for objective, we have the R for reflective, we have the I for interpretive. Now it's time to take action, because the risk when we are having a conversation, it's in a group dynamic, we start with a lot of things, with a lot of insights, but we need to close. We need to take actions. So that's why we have the D, the decisional level. So what are the decisions that are going to be taken? And so I'm going to put it on. So what are the questions that we need to bring to the conversation to close, to take actions? And in this case, for me as a facilitator, what am I going to do to deal with this situation. It might be the silence, and I can just keep quiet and give a few minutes for the group to. So, time to decide, time to take action. So, as you can see, it's very simple. I don't know if easy, but it's a simple way and effective to go into a focused conversation in 4 steps. And what excites me the most regarding this method is that even though it's simple, we can use our senses, we can use our eyes for the objective part. What are we seeing? What did we notice? We can have our heart, our emotions, our feelings for reflective. And then we will go into the interpretation using our head, meaning. And finally, the 4th step, it's time to put our hands on, hands and feet on. It's time to move. It's time to take action. So I think it would be interesting to share with you this framework, this process. And I'm thinking, where could you use this? Maybe like Valentin and Betul were talking about, maybe at the end of a session, we can review a session using this method or it. Or maybe, like Peter was mentioning, maybe we can ask feedback to our co-facilitator, or we can ask feedback for our participants of the session using ORIT. Asking questions, specific questions, using specific verbs to get information in these levels. So, after this short explanation, I will now invite you to do some practice using ORIT. And even though this session was a mini session, I would like to have your feedback on this method and what did you learn from here. So I will put some questions in the chat and I will invite you to answer using also the chat. So let's go. So the idea is to get feedback from this and what did I learn from this process with this session. And the first question that I'd like to ask you is, what did I notice about this 4 steps method? Can you please use the chat and type your answer? What did you notice about this method? What did you see? What did you hear? Okay, it's easy, simple, practical. It has 4 steps. Brilliant. You observe that. It's 4 steps. Facts. It's all about the facts. Objectivity. No time for subjectivity. Can be used in both virtual and face-to-face session. Exactly. Even though now we are dealing with some challenges of the virtual facilitation, it can be done, as you can see. Okay. So now let's move on into the second step. What did you feel about this process? What were the emotions that this session and this method brought you? Feelings. Interested? Mm-hmm. prepared, curious. Great. Peter is feeling curious. Maybe a different perspective, more grounded. Great. Some ideas regarding your internal response. So that's the first step about, sorry, the reflection. And regarding the third step, obviously, my question will be, what does this mean to me? Does this process bring any value to your practice? Is it valuable for you? What kind of value? That value for sure. Great, Chris, thank you. So meaning, let's have our personal significance. Maybe some of you said, no, I don't care. But maybe some of you found it valuable. Needs to explore more, okay, meta dialogue, okay, some different meanings. So it's very interesting. One method, different meanings attributed. Okay, thank you. And final step, as you remember, it's time to take some action. So when it's time to take some action, my question for you will be, and I will invite you to explore this during our Q&A space. How will you use this method? Will you use it? Can you see some possibilities? What can be done? What can you be doing with this method? Which type of conversations can you have using this? Think of any conversations that you'll need to have with your co-facilitator, with some participants of a workshop that you are organizing, even to review your facilitation practice for your own inner reflection. Like Valentina said, inner reflection, journaling, after a storytelling session. Highly possible to personalize these steps first. So you have the process, and using the right verbs. And just to finish, and as a wrap up, think about eyes, heart, head, and finally, time to put your hands on. Thank you very much for being here. It was an honor to present you ORID, and I hope you can really get some focused and interesting conversations. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you so much for coming, for confirming your attendance, for all the presenters and all the hard work that they have done working on this in a very, very tight schedule. I understand and respect, and I'm very, very grateful to all of the work that they have put into this. So yes, thank you. Oh yeah, a very big round of applause. Thank you also for the attendees for being very patient with us, sending you the confirmations. We had a lot of people who were interested to attend, like over 100 and something. So yes, I'm so glad that you all have been here today and you enjoyed the event. I just also want to give a very, very big shout out for the amazing team, the amazing Soliya team that has worked, and they are behind the scenes. They are watching you. They are behind the scene. I'm the only one who's out there now speaking for them, but they are there. They have done a great work, and without that collaboration between us as a team, we would have never done this. So yes, a shout out for all the Soliya team. And last but not least, because we are willing and really, like, I see a lot of success happening here, people sharing and communicating with each other. We really want to take this further and to have this going forward in our facilitation fairs